Hey,
Good morning.
good morning. Good morning.
I just replied to your email. Sorry the
Yep,
delay.
just saw it.
Yeah. So it's crazy weekend.
That's good. That's good. Hey, Dini.
Morning.
Rob, you're back.
I'm physically back. Ectoplasm is following.
Fair enough.
Who
And
knows?
Fabian, I just saw that you have to leave early, so that's noted and okay, obviously.
Obviously.
Indeed. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm able to sit outside again today. It's a bit crazy with the weather here on and off, but we'll take it when we can, right?
It'll be sunbathing weather during the symposium, right?
No promises. It is still London, despite all of this. It is a bit scary, actually. I see little green buds on some of the trees and plants that shouldn't have it now. So I think nature is a bit confused. But yeah, aren't we all to some extent? Hi, Carl.
You got a haircut. Really shorter.
Did I?
And you
Or
look
maybe you just
sharper.
combed it really
News to
well.
me.
Shorter and sharper. Yes. I think Mark is coming too. Let's just give him another minute. And then fun things to look at. Fun things on what we're going to discuss and what we're not going to discuss. While we're waiting, a few brief updates. I went to the Royal Society for the 75th. Oh, yeah, Mark's there. Hi,
Good
Mark.
morning, Mark. How are you?
Morning,
Fine,
morning.
sorry. Deep in data fixing tasks. So.
Yes. I was just doing a really brief update. So last Thursday, I think some of you know, I was at the Royal Society where we were celebrating the 75th anniversary of Alan Turing's paper on what later would become known as the Turing test.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting people. Dame Wendy Hall was one of the hosts, which was interesting. Mark and I know her well from Southampton. She was my PhD
Wasn't she your
thesis advice.
dissertation chair?
What's that?
Wasn't she your dissertation chair? You knew her pretty well, right?
Yeah, she's the one who gave me the scholarship. She's the one who was my official advisor. But then she didn't really do much advising. The sessions that I had with you, Dini, when you helped me with interviews and other, were significantly more useful for me to understand.
I didn't help you. I didn't do anything with your dissertation at all. I
Yes, you
didn't
did.
touch it. And I've never saw your dissertation, never saw a word of it.
No, but you helped me understand what it should be.
Okay, I don't remember any conversations. I remember making your CV.
Yeah, there is that. Um,
That's all I remember.
yeah, no, there is that too. So yeah, it was phenomenally interesting, and I'm very, very glad I went there. Philip Ball was there. Fantastic author on science. He's written a book on how life works, quite literally. So I didn't recognize him. He came up and was super excited. He was in one of the first Future of Text, and he wants to be part of what we're doing now. So we'll see about that dialogue. He then introduced me to one of the speakers, Anil Seth. He has written the book Being You about consciousness, which was absolutely amazing. And it's a book that I literally have on my table. He's also very interested in our work and would like to have a further dialogue, which is fantastic. Plus, he's actually a good friend of Andy Clark, and he wants to introduce us to Andy Clark.
Who's Andy Clark? I don't know who these, you're name dropping people I don't know.
Extended
I'm not
mind.
cool. Who are these people?
Andy Clark came up with the notion of the extended mind. That's what he's
Okay.
most well known for.
Does everybody
So
else know who he is? Rob, do you know who Andy Clark is? No. Mark? Probably no.
I sort of recognize the name. I think I've read his book. It doesn't stick in my mind, though.
Yeah. Further, when you
Um,
mention these people, you might want to tell us who they are because we don't know them.
no, that's absolutely fine. I mean, Andy Clark is a British philosopher, and he is known for that. So that's kind of exciting. He's known for the notion of the extended mind, so it's very relevant to our world. He's one of the foremost philosophers. Now, my philosopher friends are all very excited. Paul Smart, Mark, he works with him to some extent. In fact, he's doing an LLM version of him in dialogue with him. where they're experimenting with finding out things that he wouldn't have thought of, as opposed to things he would know. So that was kind of good. Two more updates before I have a tiny slideshow for you guys for some dialogue today. After last Monday's discussion on AI, I told my guys to look at Apple Intelligence, and in a day, they have added Apple Intelligence to author and reader. So that means that if users want to, they can literally click a checkbox and the local AI is what is used. A downside of that is that it doesn't have as huge windows of data. So I tried on an earlier transcript of one of our sessions to see if it could do the same kind of extraction of keywords and stuff, and it said no. So for users, there is an option that if they choose Apple Intelligence, and if the data is too much, it automatically goes to ChatGPT, something, of course, I'm not going to be using for our data. But it took 1 day to change it around. I was really surprised. It looked quite complicated, but I guess they know what they're doing.
I mean, in theory, the only thing you have to do is forward a string to, an endpoint.
In theory, yes. And in theory, because it went so well, we are going to try with the Ollama and other things in the future.
So
That's
are you
why-
using MCP bridges then?
No, Apple Intelligence gives an API on macOS 26. So we're using the native local because it's already there. It's kind of amazing. The language, when I tried to read it as a non-programmer, was beyond comprehension. It was not as simple as you say, Carl, although I'm sure in practice it turned out to be. But it was a good experiment.
Who's we? We're going to be using this in the future. Who's we?
Oh, I'm talking about author. I'm not imposing any.
Oh, you mean we
AI.
author? We author people.
No, I mean the software author. I will be experimenting with Ollama as well as Apple Intelligence. If there are kind of local LLMs available, like Fabienne has been experimenting with that, if there is something we can plug into our common workflow, we should definitely discuss that, but that's not something necessarily of a priority. Hi, Jimmy. No, exactly, Fabienne. So if we decide to put this into the environment we're working on, we can do that. I just wanted to tell you that when I did it for my normal software, it just took 1 day to update, which was quite nice.
Out of interest, does the tool now tell you if it's using local or external AI? It's one of the things I'm really noticing at the moment, involved in some other tools that are bridging this gap, is a lot of people have information that cannot legally go outside their computer. And a genuine concern is, it's nothing to do with whether they like or don't like AI, but the people at the sort of face of doing this don't really think about that, because to them it's just a programming problem. Actually, to most people, it's the information is the scary part, because they don't want to go to the big house for sending all their patient data off to the cloud. So it's you sort of need a big scary warning that tells you whether you're going externally or not. I mean, if you're just asking rando questions of basically automated Google, well, that's not such a big deal. But if you want to look at your own data, then it's actually a significant concern and needs to be, I would suggest, you almost need as a red boundary on the window or something to say, okay, now now it's safe or not safe.
So the way we've done it is that when the user goes to settings and they go to Ask AI, first they can choose to use Apple Intelligence at all. They may choose not to. And then there's a secondary option, use ChatGPT if selection is too large. It's not automatic.
Yeah, the point is that what I'm trying to say is a suggestion from actually seeing some work is that it's not to do with the settings which are behind the curtain. It's when you're actually working in the tool that you have a visual tellback as to whether you're working in a safe environment or an unsafe environment.
Yeah, the use ChatGPT is off by default. And I have thought about showing people, like with iOS and so on, if you have all these settings, you say it now says now talking to ChatGPT. I understand that. I have not implemented that here, but if you now use just Apple Intelligence and I do something like this, I say, it says, the selection exceeds the current Apple Intelligent limit. Please select less text or use ChatGPT. Right. If I have that on,
About how
it'll
many
run.
words is that?
I can't remember right now, and it's by token, of course, so it's
course.
not huge. But now that I'm getting this feedback, this is from ChatGPT. But that's only because I explicitly turned on the option to use it.
Yeah, okay. So the point I'm getting at, which you might find useful to think about, and this is not by way of critique, is that in that last dialogue, there was nothing that told me whether I was talking to the open internet or whether I was talking to a closed model. And that's what I'm driving at, because what I'm really seeing happening is probably the people who are most excited by AI are unsurprisingly those who are the least technical, because this is their way around doing code, which I totally get. But they are at most risk of making severe data breaches because the tool is not telling them whether they're in a safe environment or an unsafe environment. Unsafe being the open web.
Yeah, I understand that, Mark. And I will see, but the problem is if I have a large warning, then it'll be obtrusive for users who have chosen to go to settings to turn it on. If I have a small warning, people probably won't see it. So the notion is that you manually yourself have to choose to go outside of the computer. It won't do it by default. But yeah, so any other questions or comments? I have a brief presentation to go through a few points with everyone. Yes, Rob.
I'm just a comment. I received from the Authors Guild a notification about an Anthropic settlement of several $billion. And I've followed the little breadcrumbs and discovered that there are 3 of my books that have been used in that looting of the past. And so I filed a claim, which is worth actually several $1,000s. I probably won't get it.
Now you can come to the symposium.
If I got it now, I could come. Actually, it was just about buy a ticket.
It's a bizarre world to have to deal with things like that, but I'm glad, Rob, that you found that out. That's for sure.
Yeah, we'll see. But my trust of AI is very low.
Yeah, I mean, there's many different. One of the things that came up on Thursday with the AI half day was there's many different kinds of AI, for analysis, extractions, and so on. We need to expand our vocabulary. So, but yeah, Rob, makes complete sense. Fabian.
Yes, so for the anecdote, I gave a workshop on Saturday on pirating, like how to download free stuff. Because I do think it's interesting and it raised a bunch of questions on freedom and why you cannot do it, and Disney and DRM and what is a computer? Is it truly your computer? All this. It wasn't actually about how to get stuff for free. And when you have the discussion, usually people don't want this because they do care for 3D artists, musicians, authors, etc. But indeed, it is a weird, bizarre world we're into where the biggest corporations, because Claude is gigantic, OpenAI is one of the companies with the highest valuation. It's like a meme stock that is beyond comprehension, but they get kind of a pass. They can like, okay, well, you download the whole internet, like Meta has been, quote, pens down because they included even porn. They downloaded like so much stuff and illegally. And then they were trying to through suits, through settlements, through so many ways to it is actually for the greater good of humanity. And they were not academics. They were not researchers that actually do it for the greater good of humanity. The humanity for them is the venture capitalists that gave them the money initially and then shareholders at the moment. So it is nuts to me to hear this kind of settlements that how is we've been for years, decades now with MPAA and RIAA in the US and same in Europe, copyright and the right of creators is so important. It's like the fundamental building block of the knowledge economy kind of rhetoric. And when it's this kind of corporation, it's like, greater good of humanity. So yeah, drive me nuts. Sorry.
Agree, Tom.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of this comes from the collision of copyright and profit. I mean, at the end of the day, and unfortunately, we don't have a good answer for that. And authors need to make a living, but I when it comes to my own personal usage of books, a lot of times is that I have paper copies of books, but I need to get them into a local LLM, a RAG, because I want to analyze them. I want to use them to compare with other books and things like that. I have libraries of things where I can like compare very quickly as a tool. Like if I'll put together a lesson for my students and I'll say, does this meet the requirement? Does this meet, the standards in these books that I have in my library? And it will literally go up against those and give me a reason. Okay, that works, does this, it doesn't do this, it does this. And that way I can iterate my teaching very quickly as a result of that. But in order to get those copies of digitized books, I have to go to a pirate site like Anna's Archive and download them. There's no other way because you can't buy and unlock, you can't put a Kindle book into an LLM. The only other way is to manually scan them yourself, which is not realistic either for people who have limited amounts of time. And so that's the issue. What is the purpose of a book? And to me, at least, I don't mind my books being sucked into these things because my priority is not making money off of them. It's sharing my ideas. But again, I have the luxury of not being I am a professional author, but I don't depend on my income for my books to survive. And so therein lies the rub. And so that gets back to the whole, how do we balance that out? Because, I recognize that my ideas are not my ideas. They're a compilation of ideas that I've gotten from other people. And I want to give them credit and use them as much as possible. But that's part of my responsibility to move the ball forward. And that's what every scholar does. So therein lies the problem. And AI has made that a hell of a lot more efficient. And I'm really excited about the additional productivity I can get for getting my ideas out there and analyzing them against other great ideas. But so that's again, I may come off as the AI lover in the group, but I'm very practical about how I use it. I tend to be very conservative with technology anyway. I'm concerned about what I can do. And at the end of the day, that's what matters to me the most. And to make me a better writer, to make me a better whatever, thinker, coder, etc. Anyway, just want to throw that out there.
Dina, you're muted still.
I disagree with you. However, it's hard to stand on shoulders when there's no goddamn shoulder to stand on. You're jumping. The problem is, I was showing my students the other day, how to use AI effectively in their class, right? In their writing. And I said, let's look up something together. Now who said this? How do you reference this? You're referencing the chat, and we're referencing in our references your question, what you posed, but we don't know who said this. And let's check to see if this is correct information. Oh, look, this is wrong. So the problem is you are a college professor and you are smart and you know how to check references. You have a long history in the field to recognize automatically when something's wrong. But the people I'm teaching are just learning. They're just putting their wheels on the cart.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have that kind of critical thinking yet.
And that's what I'm trying to teach them too. I mean, when it comes to the actual teaching, we are using AIs, but I use the SIFT method from Mike Caulfield, who's from your part of the world. He's at the Washington.
Mike well. He used to
Oh, Mike? Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, he was hired by my former chancellor to be on our part.
Yeah, I figured you guys probably crossed paths at some point. But I find his SIFT method is actually quite effective at checking the AIs. It's not just good for looking at, random websites and seeing whether they're full of crap or not, or news articles and so on and so forth. You can apply the same method to to using an AI and dig into use those exact same skill sets. And I'm trying to teach my students how to do that because they're going to need to know how to do that because they're going to be in a polluted information. They're already in a polluted information environment. It's not going to get any better.
Well, let me just mention that every morning I get up and I look at the stat counter stats of who looks at my material. I have 10 books, right? 6 of them I track through this stat counter to see who's looking at it. And there's bots galore. And China is the biggest user, the biggest visitor. And I know that these are probably AI agents looking through my work. And I can find my stuff in AI. And yet I'm not cited. Nobody knows that I have been putting in a hell of a lot of money in the lab to come up with the things that we're coming up with. There's no reference to this. It's like, oh, somebody did this. No, people are doing this on purpose with a lot of effort, and we're not getting any credit for it. Not money, but just credit. And that for academia is a big deal.
Most LLMs will let you go back and find the sites.
Google Scholar, so that my university looks at Google Scholar indexes. And if you look at my index, it doesn't look good. But if you look at AI, I'm all over the place, right?
Yeah, that's the problem with the way your university evaluates your output. That's a problem with the university.
All universities, yeah.
I agree. But this is all part of that seismic shift in how we look at information and knowledge that we're not caught up on yet. We do not understand that the systems that we have in place are meant for a world that would be familiar to Isaac Newton, and but not don't necessarily make sense at the speed at which we're evaluating stuff right now. So
yeah. So right on to Mark, is it about AI? You're muted, Mark. Let's try not to have too much AI, please.
Why?
Sorry, I keep pressing the wrong button. No, it's just an observation, something that's sort of contingent to what we're doing is finding myself with new head-scratching problems. You may know that for over 20 years now, I've written a sort of large, basically outboard manual to a very open-ended tool, which is Tinderbox, and which has just sort of jumped on board. It now does an MCP bridge to Anthropic and is going to do Ollama, I think, soon. What's really interesting is helping the community, because now people are turning up asking questions. And it's not till you get into the sort of nth iteration of confused question and answer that when they say, I'm trying to do this, what they mean is, I asked Claude to do this and I didn't get the right answer. And then we're trying to work out how Claude understands a scripting system it doesn't understand and can't articulate, just to do something that can be done in seconds that actually, by using the tool itself. Which tells me there's a whole lot of new writing to be done, because essentially there's a whole new user out there, which is this sort of, sort of rather amnesiac AI that has to be supported in a completely different way. So I think that's an interesting challenge for us too.
So on where to go next. Hang on, suddenly some of the windows from good old Zoom are up. You can see the screen, right? So at this point, it's kind of important that we're all clear on what we are discussing and what has been decided. Sorry, you guys are covering too much. I'm going to have to minimize you. So we have to now look at the end of the project with Sloan. And our task for the next few months, whether we expect further funding from them or others, or whether our job is to inspire other people, is really, I feel, to demonstrate that we have a sliver of an idea of what it is like to be truly augmented in an XR environment. So the task is to show a human with superpowers being effective. So to use Doug Engelbart's language, we're not at this point interested in someone on a tricycle. We're interested in augmenting someone who wants to be on a racing bike. So that means that the requirements are a bit different. Though, of course, we shouldn't make anything bulky or silly. We should still really, really work on the best information flow, workflow, and so on. But I'm thinking more along the lines of, when I say superpower, jokingly, like a Spider-Man. You're in a space, you can, I know it's semi-jokey, but literally sling webs all over the place. It shouldn't be just someone sitting down, you now do this, you now do that. It should be a bit further on that. I cannot see any text. If someone has a comment directed at me, please speak them. Feel free to interrupt anytime.
I've got one question is, what are these superpowers? I mean, how do we know which people have what superpowers to which you refer?
It's a ambition of what we hope to be able to do when we're in this space. And all of us will have different ideas, which is great. And I think that should be discussed, of being able to look at information, find information, change our information view, and so on.
So are you, when you say superpowers, are you basically saying you're talking about someone who's better enabled by the tool? It's not a superpower of the human themselves, which is sort of what I read off the page. So I'm a bit confused.
I don't. Yeah, I am talking about, can the XR environment really extend our minds, give us amazing powers, not just move that there, which I think is very, very worthwhile in itself. But how far can it go? The idea I'm thinking of, maybe Sloan will put a headset on to look at this. They are not our only target audience at the end. I'm thinking of recording a demo where I didn't even realize until this sentence, like the way Doug Engelbart demonstrated his work, he would bring a film along and he would show at normal speed to many meetings, which is what gave rise to the 68 demo. And people would really not have any idea what's going on. They would just see results. And then he would go back in the analog film recorder or film playback, play it frame by frame and say, here the user does this, the result is that. So I'm thinking along the same lines, we show someone doing magical, Tom Cruise or Fantasia things happen, information changes. And then afterwards, we explain, okay, so what they had to do here was a certain gesture, there was a certain interaction, and so on. So 3 things. The workflow has been decided, and we'll have a look at that in a moment. The interactions we need to finesse. We pretty much have them. In other words, Fabian has pretty much built them. The XR configurations, meaning we've used so many terms for this. I'm trying to use a really neutral one, configuration, whether it's a knowledge sculpture or spatial arrangement or whatever it is. So, Fabian, please.
Yeah, just to understand a bit like the process, are you saying we're basically changing gear and that what we do for the last 3 months for the Sloan project is not what we've been doing so far, or something else?
I'm saying all of this is based on SPACA, spatial scaffolding, all of it. But I'm saying that there are some things, actually, Fabian, with all due respect, which is a lot, please watch and look. I am not at all suggesting you throw away your code and start again, but you will have, what's that? What happened?
I have a phone call. Sorry, I had to get off the phone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, don't worry. So, yeah, Fabian, please, I think it'll answer itself to a degree that only you can answer much better than me. So the workflow that we need to support to an extent, and I have to emphasize, all of this can break. None of this needs to be a flawless product. If it turns out that we have a few unconnected demos that we glue together in a video editing program and explain that they're different things, I'm fine with that. But the basic flow is that you can start with number 2, writing text in space, or you can import data. I've talked about Author before, but you can import lots of different files already supported. There is a list of them. Fabian, if you want to, please put them into the chat, but not necessary. And then the key thing, the big thing, is the user building configuration. It could be just plain text in space like we've had, or text with metadata, or citations, which can be shown as a book or a bubble or whatever. Also, entire documents, data sets, even RSS feeds. These are the playthings that we have, right? Then we need to work on the interactions for how to deal with these things. I'll get back to that, of course. And then user exits XR. And just like we have now, which with the brilliant demo that was presented at ACM, Hypertext, there is a JSON waiting for you. And the notion, which really doesn't need to be implemented at a high level, is that the user can take that, whatever that was, paste it into a normal document. It can be Word, doesn't have to be author, at the back with some intro text that says, this is really cool spatial stuff. And then when that document is exported, goes back into this environment, the system can parse that, find it at the back and say, oh, there's some really cool spatial stuff here. A key with that is I'm writing a paper for the European University in St. Petersburg based on a presentation on the 22nd of November. And one of the things that's come out of writing that, and I will share it with you guys soon, of course, is a 3D model and the spatial configuration of knowledge is not the same thing. Of course, we know that. Of course, we shouldn't just piggyback on GLF or whatever it is. We have to figure out new ways because it's knowledge in the environment. It's something different. I hope this is superficially clear. So let's look at configuration in XR, and I wonder what the reaction will be. But the notion is that we should kind of choose which configuration. Should we try to do zigzag or sculpting, concept mapping, data exploration, virtual library time? All of these things we've discussed many times, right? It comes down to different information and different tasks require different tools and views. You can't do all knowledge work in one configuration, which is why we've been talking about view specs a lot, right, Mark? So here's the cool thing. This is key for what XR allows us to do. It allows us to do all kinds of things and change it. So my notion going forward, in terms of thinking, not in terms of overloading Fabienne, is that we should do everything. And then the way that I like to think of it is you have a thing that we have built, a knowledge space, and you snap your fingers and now suddenly everything's different. Whether your data comes along or not is an interesting discussion. This is core XR. So if we end up in December, or hopefully before, with a couple of these things that are vastly different, I think that would be wondrous. So going back to the workflow and looking at interactions in XR, we know this stuff already. And we have a list, which is not complete, of interactions that needs to be possible. Entering text, doing basic direct manipulation, and then if you look at the middle, changing space with information retained or without information retained. We have to keep refining these things. We've gone through lists of this myriads of times because they, of course, have to be married up to the interfaces we have. And now it's going to get quite simple because I have a big surprise for you, Fabienne, in terms of something I hope you will be happy with, and that is this. We're going to look a little bit on the wrist taps, palm taps, finger taps to execute commands or spawn a ring menu for mono menu, selected object, and all of that. So what I propose, since the menuing system, whether it's gesture-based, finger-based, is going to be really, really important. What do you all, and particularly you, Fabienne, think about having a way the user can edit this? I know it's possible because of your brilliant way of making the spatial scaffolding where you can even use code snippets for this type of thing. Any thoughts, Fabienne?
No, I'm listening.
Okay. So what I'm really saying is that it's time to test and compete. So we'll try to do some basic actual configuration environments, whatever. But if all of us can go in and, you know, let's say argue over what the thumb should be, that's useful. That's research. And I hope we can change it easily. So
can I suggest just something there that on that last point, that I think the basic point you're making there is really useful, that essentially for that sort of these tools to be useful, you need to be able to essentially change the assignments to reflect what you're trying to do. If that's the case, then I think it's the wrong way to look at it is things like what does the thumb do, but to understand the things that is to understand what a thumb might do and how that maps to the possible interactions. So that the point is, I think what this boils down to is think of it a bit like a sort of like a CSS for the menus. In other words, so the right command, so to speak, ends up in the right place in the right context. But I suspect that if we work backwards from sort of, in a sense, thinking too directly about the hand, we'll end up in the wrong place. I think that the freedom that comes out of this is to understand, okay, how do we build a nice flexible mapping so that as I flop from task A, from maybe looking at a timeline to, I don't know, looking at something else, that the affordances attached to my fingers, for instance, will change for me because we've thought through what should there be there. So in other words, it matters less precisely whether it's attached to this finger or that finger. That's a fine tuning within a command set that you're doing at the time. So in this task, I might want a certain command on a different finger, for sake of argument, or even a different hand, to where I'm doing it in another task, because the nature of the task is different and the nature of the interaction is different.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But I think I agree 100% with the addition, not a but an and. The commands have to be somewhere in order to be executable. So we need to find them somewhere, whether it's in a finger or a ring menu or whatever. Absolutely. Secondly, absolutely, when you're in one thing versus another thing, the commands will be different. Some of them should remain the same, like you should always pinch to move, for instance. You shouldn't have to change that. You should also always have a single way or more, but at least a consistent way to change your entire environment. So this is something that I know a lot of you, and I certainly also have thought about and written up and done all kinds of maps again and again and again. Now it's time to just do it. And if it turns out that we put something on the thumb and it's a bit stupid, we put it somewhere else. So yes, now it's time to just do it. So skimming through here, because I have just made the next slides irrelevant for that reason. There's a very good point coming out of the research from ACM Hypertext that having two wrist things might be too much. I accept that, and I'm really, really wondering what to do about that. So with the notion that we are trying to augment someone who's quite serious, who will learn, what we might do as a, not as a compromise, but as a graduated introduction, is we only have a sphere, but once the user is of a certain skill set, maybe they also have something on the right then. There's nothing wrong with having a simplified introduction to not overwhelm people. Absolutely, 100% agree. But architecturally and interface-wise, we should not design ourselves in a corner so we can't add stuff. So that is why the cube is here, but I'm not saying we need to have it in the introduction. Gestures, all of that text says what we already have. We have the phenomenal Fabienne-style positioning billboarding, meaning you let go, it faces you, and then it doesn't move anymore. We have a few things like that. They're amazing. And as we all know, there are some things that need to be polished based on the ACM hypertext that might come under that. The mana menu, my feeling is that we should not have many commands, if any, that are just one finger tap, because that reduces the grammar of being able to say, do this with this and this way, or submenus. I may be wrong. This is what I hope we can now experiment with. So everything on here is now become irrelevant if Fabienne agrees it's reasonable to relatively easily assign, because then these can almost be random to begin with. And then we have meetings where each of us have, decided on things. The ring menu, the only notion with that, is I think it's a very powerful way of not doing just one thing. We had really great stuff last year where we could, on the menu, we had a kind of a branching thing, which made a lot of sense. So this is kind of a continuation of that, where in the future, the notion will be you hold up a finger, you do a thing, and after a while, it's like you learn sign language. You don't need to look, right? So as far as the configurations are concerned, I'm suggesting, and this is the last slide, no, almost the last slide, we have a beautiful gray space for annotated bibliography, which we should not get rid of, to make that clear. We should be able to toggle between it. There's a discussion of a cube where the information index, so on, is on the outside of the cube. There's also been some discussions of a cube that can become really big and you're inside it, as you've seen. There is Knowledge Exploration Space, TM Mark Anderson, where whatever's in the space will be interacted in that way. There's also, I think we should, if it's not a lot of effort, make a very, very traditional looking physical library just to see how it feels. Sometimes going non-exciting may help go in the other direction. Maybe we do timeline, maybe we do a writer's room, and then I put at the end here an abstract information room, which I have no idea what is. The thing is, just a brief reminder, and this is the last, as you've all seen many, many times, if you have a lot of data, it can quickly get very, very messy, right? So just for fun, I've asked my programmers to add a thing for us in Author to help us see how that translates, where actually I thought they would be ready by now, but they haven't been able to, which is fine. But I'll show you really briefly. These are the commands that I expect, and then I'm done. Sorry. Right. So when you select a node, you should be able to hide everything that isn't selected, just to make it easier to see. That's useful. Also, and this is an opposite one, this is my final point. Imagine if you select something and, like in this example, it points to one thing. No, it points to several things. An example would be, let's say we're organizing the guest list for the future of text. So you select that, and all these people are selected, but they're messy. So if we have a command that is, let go of what you just selected, but select everything that it points to, then you can do exciting things with, I don't have it here, but exciting things with layouts. You can do align vertically, align horizontally, like this. You can also do commands like horizontal alphabetically, horizontal numerically, of whatever you have selected, as very basic stuff. So in closing, the notion is just playing, even on a 2D thing, it gets messy. We need ways to deal with it. Now we're at a point where all of us should be able to design a thing, right? Fabian has made basically a super smart Lego set for us. We can import a lot of stuff. We don't have the mechanism to change a PDF into a golf ball, but I'm pretty sure that if we needed that, and it's not a bad thing to do because golf balls can have colors and textures, Fabian can make that happen. So I would really like to hear what you guys think. Let's say we agree that it would be useful to allow us all to assign commands to different things to an extent, an experiment. Let's say we agree with that. What do you all think about the thing you want to design yourself? Over. Thank you for your patience. That was a lot longer than I expected. Oh, Danny has a question here. I'm going to go through the chat. How many are planning to make? That is, in a respectful and loving and serious way, irrelevant. I feel that we should basically throw it out there, and Fabian, who has to build this stuff, decides. I have absolutely no preference for any specific one of them. If my designs are utterly thrown away, I don't care, because we have so many great different ideas now. And if I am lucky enough to be presenting at one of the things coming up and saying, we have this, we have that, that in itself will be amazing. The cube has a, let's call it the prism. Yes, we've used the cube up a little bit. Well, Danny, planning to do, I'm just planning to stare this last bit. I have to be honest with what this project was based on. It was based on, the reason we got this money. It was based on the systems that I had already built, and we've done some really brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Mark. I see Carl. Just 1 second. And the systems that I have been focused on are systems where the user invests to use. I just got a lovely email from someone at Harvard yesterday saying they really love Author, which was nice and very random. The design style that I have is not for everyone. I think that's okay. I think all of us here are of the relative same taste, with creative differences. Sorry, that was just for Dini. Carl, please.
So kind of kind of a whole lot of stuff that kind of ties back things that were mentioned up to 10-ish minutes ago now. So there's a couple of things. If trying to put this in logical order, I'll just spew out random things. We can put the order together later. So one of the things my advisor beat into my brain when I was doing my master's research is the question, why are we doing this in XR? Anything can be ported to XR, but the question is why? Why would we do this? Why this specific piece of hardware? Why this specific piece of software? Why this platform? Whatever. If this could be done on another one, why are we doing it on this one? Is it for curb appeal? Is it for like, but there's a myriad of answers to that question. And I think for this, the answer that we're trying to move towards is there is something better about doing an existing workflow in the headset versus not. And that ties back into that superpower thing you were talking about is what does the headset, the virtual environment, what does that give me the ability to do or access to that I don't have traditionally? And that can be a myriad of things. And it depends very heavily on what metric you are trying to optimize for. Are you trying to optimize for efficiency so that you do something faster with fewer clicks? Are you trying to optimize for cognitive load so that the user has fewer things that they have to juggle at one time? There's several different metrics you can optimize towards. And I don't think any of us are of the belief that XR, even when built perfectly, will match or beat traditional workflows on all or even most axes. Tools should be specifically optimized for one metric so that when users using traditional workflows or traditional hardware are really scraping against that one metric, that this is a good alternative for them to use. And like we've mentioned, there's different ways to do that with input mapping, with other things. It might behoove us to lay out some specifics, and I know Mark, because Mark's been doing this kind of stuff a long time. There are traditional workflows that use half a dozen different tools, whether it's hardware, software, a combination of both, whether you have to have 5 different tabs open in your browser to get the thing done, to follow the train of thought, to keep your place, whatever it is. There's a bunch of that kind of stuff that we can explicitly pull out and say, here's my workflow, and here's what sucks about it. And how is it possible, even if we don't actually implement it within this next time frame, how is it possible that we can sand off these edges if we port that workflow into the headset? And then how much gain do we seek to get from doing that versus the development cost and the teaching the new user the new workflow and the new hardware? There is plenty of that design space and plenty of gain to be had there, but we need to try to make it explicit.
Thank you, Carl. What we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do, and I'm hoping you agree, is something slightly different. I'm not, my day job, so to speak, is optimizing tools, fewest clicks, most efficient, get the views, do all the work, all of that. This is not that. This is exploration, and this is art. This is theater. The notion that I'm trying to get across to the person putting on the headset at the end of the day for this is, damn, there's a lot of options here. And that's really important because when I started writing this paper for the presentation I'm doing to the European University thing, it was in response to an academic friend of mine who wrote about our work. I posted on our Slack for those who want to read it, which is incredibly glowing about how XR will change the human brain and all of that good stuff. Really inspirational, even more hyperbole than I write. So when I started writing this reply kind of thing, I start by saying, we still have eyes going into this. You know, there are limitations, as we all know. We've really come up over this world. And Mark and I have very different ways of looking at data. We almost look at it from 2 sides of the same coin, which has been incredibly fruitful, right? And it's been a very good pull back and forth. And I just realized a few days ago that if we can demonstrate that the user can change to do both, even if they're both not that brilliant, even if it turns out that they are a bit of a waste of time, and then you snap into another one, that has tremendous value. Because I think the user who tries it can feel that, yeah, no, I could do this here, and that's, and then you do an interaction. It's like, hang on, now I'm in a traditional library. I just put up something there. Yeah, okay, and then you do the other thing, and now you have 200 articles in front of you can interact with. The fact that you changed your entire world instantly, I think that beats everything, because almost any XR thing can be replicated in cardboard, so to speak. But you can't change it. Fabian, I am so excited to hear from you.
So it was, I think, said a bit as a provocation, but the randomness aspect, that's also the remark I put in the chat, is, I think, quite interesting. That and I think it would really highlight a lot of the work that's been done for the last 18 months or a bit more now. That we the same way that now the environment is quite flexible. It cannot do, let's say, the golf ball folded. I wish, but not easily, at least. I don't think so. But there are indeed a lot of like parameters in the URL and whatnot. Some half-ass documentation-ish, to be direct, but it is there in some form. But I think indeed, if when we haven't, I'm not saying everything should be random, but yeah, thank you, Tini. To be pragmatic and keeping us on track, the randomness and it's being in use in a couple of fields and places is interesting, because we could indeed put something like saving or whatnot on a finger, or we could say, again, not forcing people. If somebody doesn't want random, and that's also what I put in the chat, that if, let's say, you narrow it down to a specific configuration, let's say the color in the background and the user interface and the comments floating or not floating, or the, what's the name, the billboarding or not billboarding, then you should keep it. It's not saying it starts random and it stays random. It starts random if you want to, and then you can save it. Because I don't know if some of you remember, but if you drag and drop a command on the cube on your wrist, that becomes the command. And so if you have a list of things you can do, then it should be persistent, so that next time you reload, or if you want to share to a friend, like say, oh, you tried and you put on the wrist folding or hiding one of that, and you love it, then you could, it's not feasible now, but you could share this as a friend to a friend, because we're a colleague, because I think that delegates a part of that exploration through our research, so the myriads of prototypes done in the past, so that that configuration itself, not where the objects are in space, but how we interact through the different things. I think that could be very interesting. So, yeah.
Totally agree. That's interesting. Mark, please go ahead.
I was just thinking on the aspect of randomness. I mean, one of the other papers I was presenting back in Chicago was Debugger's information space, which was essentially a three-dimensional thing done in 2D, but the idea being that you made a little city and walked around, and you might have your sort of philosophy quarter and your I don't know, your romance quarter or whatever, and part of that is it might essentially create a degree of serendipity, and one of the interesting ideas we discussed was, well, you might have a random quarter where essentially when you walked into it, it was never the same. And because it's a constructed space, it doesn't need to be. I mean, as long as the things that the sort of the objects are completely unrecognizable, but in a sense, the layout, the juxtaposition of the objects, the ideas might change, and that's useful. That said, my observation just over time is that that will be very useful for some people, but most people want to use random sort of this as a tool. So in other words, I went to the serendipity department and I learned nothing. I am unhappy, 0 stars, will not use it, which of course is not the point. You actually have to be part of that process and be open to the idea that you might see something. And one other thing that arose from just listening is that I'm not sure I totally buy the notion that people who are interested are those who will learn. We'd like to think that, but my observation of people isn't quite that. So I think things like, curb appeal gets you an initial interest, but that falls off rapidly. The people who engage are people who find something really useful, and that will normally drive their learning. Now, some people may require more help with their learning because what they're dealing is further from their sort of area of safe or their area of experience or knowledge. But then they're normally very self-incentivized to learn. Others will just bootstrap themselves through. But I think there is a danger of assuming there is this sort of Uber user who will sort of step through in a way that we might like to design for. I suspect they're probably something that lives in books about UI design or something, or user experience design, but I don't think they're human beings.
At this point, first of all, I love the fact that you used bootstrapping, Mark, which was a Freudian slip of grand proportions in a very good way. At this point, we are not going to be able to build an incredibly productive place. We just don't have time. Our job now is to experiment to experience, right? So we can use dummy things. Mark, you pointed out, and I've been really listening, and I've been really wondering when it could fit in. You used the notion of silver balls in space, right? We're at the point where that should be one of the things we can do, and it can represent different things. We're at the point now where all of us, if we want to, should be able to design one space. For the sake of argument, Peter, even though you're much cleverer than that, because you brought up libraries, let's pretend, Peter, you design a very traditional library that has your traditional books on the side. Yes, Fabian. So you have to go. You should be able to do that. And Fabian should be able to look at it and say, this is rubbish, can't do it, or this is great, can do it. The rest of us, honestly, no matter how technical we are, we don't know because we don't know the details of the spatial scaffolding environment, right? But this is the point where we put a friend in the headset, forget these other people, and we say, okay, let's say we start with basically what we have. Here's a map of topics. You can move it here, you can move it there. The simplest thing. We have it already, right? And let's say we have something like the Brandel's Bob Horn mural in another one. But the fact that you can go between them, right, to really just hammer home, because the thing that I start my European University paper with is the very first thing that I built in XR was when Mozilla had this environment you could do it yourself, which doesn't exist anymore. It was when we had the Future of Text Linnaean Society. And all I did was I had cool things on the wall. Then I had a card, index card here, was connected with a line to another one. I don't know who remembers that, but putting on the headset and seeing it in the space, the connecting line was actually really annoying. It was almost like a physical washing line. It wasn't a really neat information connectivity thing. That was a shock. So I think that people who don't have our experience to be able to go in and it's like, I don't like this. Flip, do another one. Oh, this is cool. Oh, I can relate to this one. Canonical reference, Mark. Fabian, do you have another minute to reply to Mark's question?
Yes. Well, I mean, it's the idea is precisely that you don't have like a finished either a tool or set of tools that all of us work in our knowledge space, let's say our desk or our physical desk or our desktop. So we do small scaffoldings, can really be like post-it notes, etc. And the spatial aspect is because in XR it makes no sense if it's like totally flat. It must be spatial, and it's kind of hinting at literal scaffolding as you have on a building being built in construction, in the sense that you do your task or whatever, you put the scaffolding if you want, and then you remove it if you want. If you want to keep it, you can. So that's the kind of idea behind it, or the motivation behind it.
So I have a question for you in the sideline there, Fabian, as well. On Slack, I uploaded I have implemented now in Reader upload to XR, which actually takes the PDF that's selected and the metadata and uploads it If you just have a look at because it's far back in our chat, that's why I'm just saying it now. If you could see if it works, that'd be cool. So Fabian has to leave in a few seconds, and we have a bit more time. Why don't you all just say for your preferred and work environment, you don't have to write anything after this unless you want to, but let's say you're building one. Do you all want to go through and just say what you want? So we have more of a menu or a smorgasbord, as they say. See you later, Fabian. Tom, you're leaning forward. I'm expecting you to go first. You're a bit
I'm
muted,
getting a
I'm afraid.
link to show. I'm getting a link to show you what I want.
Okay.
Because a picture is worth 1,000 words, as I like to say.
And the other way around.
Yes. Well, I don't know. Not every 1,000 words is worth a picture. I've seen some speeches that should probably just be burned. This is one of my favorite visualizations. What this outfit does is the Open Syllabus Project. They have scanned all of the publicly available syllabi throughout I don't know if it's world or the US, but the cool thing is they're looking for commonalities in titles and trying to see who's using the same books and sources in different courses. It's really a knowledge map. It's a map of the knowledge that higher education in the United States seeks to impart to the students. And so to be able to get that level of perspective is really interesting because and boringly enough, the most used book is Strunk and White. But you know, you can look for people's books and say, oh, okay, this person's used in history, but also in graphic design. Now that's really interesting. Why would that happen, right? But that's what I'm kind of really fascinated with because I want to be able to have an environment where I can see these things and sort of, you know, fly my way through them and see these constellations of ideas and how they connect to one another. You know, this is more of a heat map than a concept map, but you know, they're kind of doing the same sort of thing. I think you could come up with some interesting combinations thereof. And doing that in 3D is going to be, you know, that much more powerful. That's what I want to see.
That is really cool. Noted. Question. Entirely optional. If you find APIs for this data, it becomes all the more likely that it can be somehow interacted with. Who am I going to pick next? Or is anyone ready?
I think this is
are you
all
ready?
open, but Frodo, I think this is all open. I think you should be able to just, yeah, their data set I think is completely open. I think you could find that if you wanted to.
As long as there is an API for it or a downloadable thing or something. But okay, very cool. Dini, do you want to talk?
No, thank you.
A bit within the context of what we have done and where we are going. Do you have any specific goodness gracious me's?
Well, I think last week I made a pretty clear case for the things we wanted to move forward with, and I even published a document about that. It came out of 10 hours of testing at the Hypertext conference that Mark and I did.
Yeah.
And then the questions that Mark and I put together weeks before that, and then came back and wrote major reports about, and then condensed it down. I met with Fabian about last Thursday and shared with you. So I've done a lot of work on this and I've talked about it. And I think it's good to hear from other people and to see how we're going in the last 3 months of our time. So I'll just be quiet and listen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was an extremely valuable report and research. And what is relevant for that, which is basically most of it, absolutely will be done. Okay, Rob, what do you think? What do you want?
Did you say Rob?
Yeah, I did.
Oh. I can say something about Open Syllabus. I started my life as a traveling book salesman for Harper and Row selling college textbooks. And I can imagine that as an extremely useful tool for the marketing people in the Harper and Row College Department.
Hmm.
But I'd be interested in it as well because I do think that there are crossovers that are interesting in textbooks or any kind of book that looks like it belongs in one domain and actually is quite applicable to some other one. And I like making those connections. So more of that.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks, Danny, for that research document. Peter, you asked about that, and I'm asking you, what would you like to see built? Is Peter away from the mic for a second? Okay, how about you, Jimmy? Is Jimmy away as well?
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I just jumped in. I gotta click the thing first. For me, again, I know there's so many different adjacent possible directions that you can reach in and move. For me, where I think the sweet spot of using a three-dimensional surface area with 6 degrees of freedom layered on that and it embodies sort of capability space really shines is not on the super detailed granular interaction with a text. So that would mean typing or reading a particular tract. It would be in the ability to consume large multi-dimensional tracks of information at the same time through some sort of visualization at a distance. And that to me is where you get the best bang for the buck. So taking a very large corpora of data, having it sliced and diced in 10 different ways and seeing that all in front of you at the same time, to me is a superpower that you're talking about, for my money.
Interesting. Thank you. Carl, I expect you have ideas.
If I was gonna wave a magic wand and design a tool that I was going to use in XR in place of some existing workflow that is centered roughly around text, writing white papers and working on my dissertation has been a headache because it requires 20, 30, 40 different Chrome tabs, 2 or 3 different things for my LaTeX editor, my bibliography page, where I'm storing my local files versus what I'm still in the pending, like I need to read this. Is this relevant bucket for like white papers that I have searched and found but haven't read yet and don't know if they're relevant, don't know if I need to cite them. Constantly having to go back and look and see from the stuff that I've already cited and put in my bibliography, what did I cite this for? What else is in that paper besides this one sentence that I cited it for? Where else is this thing relevant? All that stuff is all over the place. It's a ton of different tabs. It's a ton of different pieces of software, some local, some online. It's local and online documents in various states that need to be tagged or flagged mentally. It's a lot for me to keep up with. And all of that leads that constant context switching. I can handle that when my brain is on the right mode, but I don't have control over when it does that. So I don't have control over when I can make progress on my document. Medication helps with this, but that's not a fix for everybody. I would really like to have all that stuff in one place that's somehow visual, that I can lay it out, move it, tag it, whatever. Even if the device needs to be connected to the internet to find the stuff that's not local, I don't care. I really want it all in one place so that I know if I want to work on my paper, I just pick up my headset and go out the door. Rather than I have to have the computer that has the tabs saved, or I have to bookmark stuff and then, sync it with my Chrome profile or whatever 30 other stupid steps I have to do to keep a train of thought from one machine to another.
So I will raise your I don't care to a higher level one. And that is for where we are at the moment, I don't care if the data is real. Carl, for instance, if you help put together an utterly fake screenshot only, lots of things in space, That would be incredible. Right now, we're at the feeling stage. A lot of the research that Dini and Mark wrote down from the ACM Hypertext is about how it should feel, where the text comes out of the virtual typewriter, the feedback sounds. These are things we have to do. The next thing that people have to feel is that information can be in the landscape. And right now, we don't know how all of it can go in and out. So if you just say, I wish I could have that there and that there, holy moly, you know. Okay, so Mark is saying synthetic data is not brilliant. No, I agree. But Carl, I'm talking about you virtually taking a screenshot of where you are now, as in a huge amount of screenshots of your actual work now, and you mock it up. It will not go to waste. It will be an incredible example of, you know, academic writing a paper. This is a screenshot of what it was. Sorry, you can't interact with any of it right now, but you get a feel for it. You know, I go back to the 1962 paper by Doug Engelbart. The introduction is a narrative of standing over someone's shoulder and being utterly confused. What's that, Dini? Did you have a comment? Oh, okay. You know, Doug is one of our main inspirations. He invented a lot of the good stuff we have. And emotionally, that's what he was communicating. There's some powerful stuff. And yeah, I agree, Mark. Real data is much better. And luckily, you have made available a huge amount of real data. So absolutely, one of the things we need to have is the ACM hypertext data in this space. And you've asked several times, Mark, and I still cannot answer how it should be shown. If you decide how you want it shown, chances are Fabienne can do that. You know, for instance, title and author could be one view. We talked about semantic zooming, scaling. We talked about all these things. We can try it now. You know, the thing that I showed you in author earlier, guys, was one hypertext proceedings, and it's a mess when it's like that. So to be able to quickly only see short papers or long papers is really useful. And then everything else can go back into something. So real data, fake data, I don't care. Let's play with environments. Peter, what would you like as a special environment room thing? Are you only typing today, Peter? Which is fine.
He's got a lot of work going on. It's a very noisy environment.
Oh, right. Yeah, he said so earlier. Thank you. So yeah, the magic of being able to switch. So one of the things we need to agree on early is the one interaction to change from Mark's room to Carl's room or whatever it is. And if we look at the notion of the ring menu and the hand menu is just brilliant, right? You touch your finger and something happens. You're unlikely to do you're not going to have gesture clash by touching your fingers. You don't do that randomly. So let's say maybe the index finger, the pointing finger on your secondary hand, touch it. And that's the thing that gives you a full ring menu of the available spaces, something like that. And then we'll find out it's ridiculous and change it. So if you have specific ideas, I would love to hear. I mean, it's so, Mark and Dini, the work that you did, the testing is so crucial because most of these will require a keyboard. So we have to have the feedback and the text have to be in the right place. Right? Things that are up for discussion are other things like, what does the sphere do? I agree with Dini 100%. It should primarily be in and out of the environment. That doesn't mean we can't dream of something for secondary use or later on when they're further trained. But for now, let's have just one.
It was interesting, actually, that one of the things I really took away from the testing was the fact that, yeah, most people unprompted, their sense was, yeah, I'm not going to be typing here. I mean, I'll be typing in extremis. That doesn't mean this is not a zero-sum thing that says no one should ever type in Excel. No, not saying that at all. But I think what came across was, okay, I'm in a space where I can sort of explore things. I might need to sort of type the odd thing, but I'm not here to do writing. I'm sort of here to understand how things fit together, and that's quite interesting. And you know, I was thinking, as you said, well, what do people want? And I'm always amused that people think I'm terribly interested in data. It's not. The reason I made all this data is what I'm really interested in: visualization. And most visualization sucks because it's built on synthetic data, and when you try and put anything real into it, it just falls over. Or you see something that's really interesting, and you try and delve to the next level, and it's a Potemkin village. There's no, you open the door and there's nothing behind it. So what that led me to is I spent rather longer than I intended looking at the information to say, well, okay, what's the next level of implied thing that I need in order to actually answer the question? Because it's all very well going into a lovely malleable space, and I was captivated in the sense that when I was first dragged, perhaps against my sort of my intent, into the XR, what I saw was a holodeck. To me, that was it. That's what I saw. Okay, I can build pretty much anything I want. And then I realized, crikey, that's an awful lot. That's an awful lot of stuff I need to know just to get to the starting place, which is one reason I'm thinking, actually, I don't need all the tables and chairs and caverns and this, that, unless they are actually pertinent to the task at hand. What I need to do is to see the things I want to see, and then what can I do with them? But so, for instance, even in our information space, and you made the point about the silver ball. The thing is, it's not a ball and it's not silver. It's what is a knowledge object? So one of the things I'm now interested in is, so when we define an object in the space, what is that thing, and what can I do with it? How many affordances does it have? Because that's actually what I'm going to interact with. And part of the thing to being able to do interaction with information more than a few objects is very quickly less becomes more, because otherwise you just hit a sort of noise scale where you just cognitively can't deal with it all. And so that's a real challenge. So we want the environment to let us keep actually cutting stuff off. So again, I think back to the demo we did, and people were saying, well, why is all this massive bit of text here? Because what we were asking them to do was to interact with the little card, which was essentially the knowledge object. But in fact, in this instance, we had two instances of something, both representing the same object. Now, that's not to critique the demo in terms of its design. We built it to do what it did, but it made me think very much about, okay, right, so what we want to sort of preemptively build into the design is don't put in stuff we don't need just because we think we might need it. It's something that if you know you might want it, you need to make sure that the environment has it sufficiently close to hand, which might be going and getting it from the internet, but it might be that it actually has to be loaded literally into the environment. And those are choices that we should embrace and understand. And this is the point where you can't just make that stuff up. You actually have to try it, because until you try it, you don't realize where it breaks. And then all the visual cleverness falls apart. So the thing I find myself thinking on is, okay, so how can how do I get from where I am to the next thing I want to do? So I've got some things in the space. What might I, having learned something about them, having had some serendipitous idea, I then probably want to normally do a revisualization or a resort, or both. So I now know that these things are connected. Well, maybe they need to be closer together. Or I may just say, no, I know that. What I want you to do is I just want you to throw all the balls up in the air, and I just want to put them wherever, because I'm going to go for a new serendipitous sort. Because I filed that idea away already. So I don't need to work on that, because that takes me into almost another sort of problem or workspace. So that's really what I'm thinking about, which doesn't fall out as a sort of as a visual design. It's actually it's the experiential aspect is really what I'm thinking about. How it looks, not too worried about the end, because that's just surface dressing when you get to the point where you know what you want to surface dress. So I'm not saying that the visuals are unimportant. No, that's not the case. But focusing on them too early actually makes it harder to understand the design that we're after. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm gonna put my hand down. I want to just say a few things. So I feel like I've done what I needed to do on the design aspect of this project. What I'm spending my time doing now for the last 3 months, besides spending our money and making sure that we're finishing up all the things that we're doing, is actually thinking about the repercussions and the implications of what we've done. And I've been thinking primarily of two different things. First and foremost, the porousness of the membrane between the physical and the virtual world. For the longest time, I worked in MOOs, and we were making things in the MOO, actually creating text in the MOO, and in the moment, in the fly of the moment, not importing things, but actually producing inside. But the difference was then we were still using a physical keyboard and inputting it into the space. What we're doing in this environment, which is totally different, and I think shows how malleable this membrane is and porous, is that we're inside the space using a virtual keyboard, creating virtual born text, and then importing that text out to the physical world. This then tells us that what I've been arguing for years is that when we look at all media as in the digital world as zeros and ones, everything is equal, even the human beings inside of it. Because when I'm inside that space and I'm typing on that virtual keyboard, it's seeing me and the words I'm creating, the text I'm producing, as zeros and ones, and then I'm producing it, moving it out into the physical world, into the computer, and it's seeing that text that I produced as zeros and ones ultimately. So that's very interesting. So the porousness of the physical and the virtual world, it's not the clear division that we had always thought it was. And frankly, it's been discussed, I think, in The Matrix and other kind of science fiction movies already. We're actually making it happen. The second thing I'm thinking about is the notion of volume and the difference between what we're producing as a book in the VR space and the book in the real world. Now, the book in the real world is a three-dimensional object, so there's really no difference, right? The book in the VR space is a three-dimensional object, so there's not much difference there. But I think the thing that does make a difference is the fact that the content itself really has no physical materiality, and that the depth and the length and the width and all the things that we think of in terms of a book volume, it doesn't exist. And so the word volume isn't the right context. And so there's got to be another word. Volume is not the word that I'm thinking about now. What is that word? And so because it doesn't really have volume, right? Anyway, volume of space, not necessarily, not in code. So anyway, so I'm thinking about those two things, and that's where I'm going with my next 3 months, managing the last bit of this project, getting past these last few months of testing and production, and thinking more theoretically so that I can move forward with my work. I think this is where I'm headed. Thank you.
That is really important and something I will be thinking about a lot, your specific notions of porous. When it comes to the next few months, I'll be doing very specific design stuff, showing it to Fabian and hearing how loud or softly he screams. You're welcome to do the same. And Mark, when I talk about visual, what I mean is, of course, there's many things happening in the mind. Of course, not everything has to be in front of you. But in order to have something in an XR space, it does have to have a visual manifestation. We're not doing sound, obviously, so that would be something else. So if you want to build an environment for some kind of data exploration, some things will need to be there. And the only way we can know they are there is if we can see them. So we need to choose how they will have an initial appearance, how we can change that appearance, and so on. Otherwise, it stays very abstract.
And I mean, it's an interesting thing, and we sort of were discussing this in Slack earlier. I mean, because I can see there's two sort of perspectives from a, for want of a better term, a sort of design perspective. For a thing to have form, it has to have a sort of description. And you quite eloquently said, okay, well, you can't put a glyph on the screen if you don't know its size and its font. And yes, but also we know that a character is an A character, whatever size, shape, or something. A bit of plain text cares not whether it exists in a database table, in a label in VR, or other places. So there's a danger of being either way, of being over literal about it. The thing is that so the text doesn't really matter how it's rendered. We might worry, and I think that's the thing we need to disambiguate. So this point about I don't quite get the angst about how something looks. The point is, at the minimal, you might say, okay, I'm going to put 40 things in or 100 things or 100,000 things in a space. So you have to have something. You have to have something visible, and maybe that something visible might be a primitive shape. Because I hesitate every time I use the term. People start saying, "Oh, you're talking about silver balls or green triangles." I think of it the other way. No, there will be a shape that will be a default shape that you have to show something, but there's a danger of obsessing about the default because because that just gets you to the point of saying, oh, actually, no, I don't need a sphere. What I really need is I need a dodecahedron or something because I'm going to show you something different on every face. So there's this preemptive design sort of gets in the way of our creativity because you can't get on the ride until you've decided what's there. It's like it's also a sort of a default sort. Well, you could just say, well, I'll just throw them all randomly, literally.
Mark, it isn't though, and we only have 3 minutes. So sorry. The thing is, even if you're talking about plain text, right, it's got to be there. And even if you don't want a silver triangle, it has to be something there. So I'm not saying, and I think it is very important what you're saying, that whatever the default is, should be so easy to change it, it's irrelevant. Absolutely agree with you. But if the thing doesn't have a visual presence, instantiation in XR, it ain't there.
So yeah, but I don't think anyone's saying it isn't. I mean, but put it another way, if I show a document, so a PDF in XR, if I only show the first page, does that mean the other 40 pages don't exist because they're not shown? If I take that argument literally, what I'm saying is the whatever you choose, that is not a proxy for all the text behind it.
That is not a counter argument at all, because that is an instantiation of that document. It could literally be a pinprick or a fly, or it could be something in the shape of a traditional book. That's okay. But if you don't have some way to see it, it ain't there, right? Some way to, when you talk about it, that is a notion of a collection of knowledge, whether it's a sentence or a book or a collection of books. We so strongly agree on the notion of view specs. You should be able to flexibly change it. But Mark, specifically with you, because you have very good and strong ideas, plus a lot of knowledge around data exploration. If you want to have, let's say, the ACM entire library in there, it has to have some visual character, even if it's very simple Helvetica font or whatever it might be, or maybe if it's blue square.
I beg to differ.
No, but Mark, you cannot tell Fabian to build something that has no visual characteristics at all. It can't be built. I mean,
no, absolutely no. Absolutely.
So you have.
I'll give you a simple example. Is that you could have. Well, let's stick with silver spheres because that seems to be unobjectionable. If there are, say, 40 items or in this year's conference, and we wanted to show those 40 items, I would be quite happy to have 40 items, 40 spheres in space in an arrangement that I understood, because I don't need the labels because I understand the arrangement. This gets to this point.
Fine,
that
absolutely.
So I'm not saying you can't show them, and at some point you might want. So one thing might be a sort of level of detail type thing, elucidation. So as I go closer to it or I interact with it, it might say hint at something. But I quite firmly reject the notion that, if you can't see some text there, there's nothing there. I think our minds are much more.
Mark, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. What I'm saying is that on a traditional computer desktop, if you don't have, let's say, just the finder, the desktop, If you don't have something to double click, you can't open it, right? Of course, you can search for it, you can do a find and it'll appear, but at a certain point, this is a visual environment. There has to be a visual instantiation of it. Of course, you should be able to expect further information. Let's say we have these silver balls and you know exactly where they are, you've organized it. Of course, you should be able to do an action to see the full paper behind them, or just the metadata, or when they were published, or the name of the author, whatever it might be. I'm not saying all of it has to be visually available at all time. Absolutely agree with you. But there's got to be something to arrange, something to move about.
Well, that's what your silver sphere is. So why is that? Why is that? I
No,
just don't get why there's this
that's-
rejection of the notion that you have to start with a text label.
I've never said that.
So if you so I don't understand what the sort of counter argument is then. So if we said we just had, so you're happy then that for instance a demo could be, for sake of argument, n silver spheres in space in some sort of range.
100%, and I believe I've said that. I'll say it again, 100%. I have no problems with
But we've
that.
never built it. We've always sort of shied away because it's come down to an argument as to what should they look like by default and what should they do. So we never get to test the basic premise.
Mark. If you only want silver spheres that have no metadata attached at all, and you want them in
No,
the
I didn't
space,
say metadata. The whole point is the sphere is the proxy for the metadata that lies behind it.
Okay. Mark, if you can write this down, as in I want it to look like this, and then I do that, and then it can be like this, you can do that, okay? If you only want, let me just say the whole sentence. If you only want silver spheres in a room, you can do that today. You go in there and you can have 20 spheres, it's not a problem. But of course, you want them to represent something. If you want them to represent something, you have to, as a design spec or a brief or whatever it is, write down, I want to initially see them, and through the interaction of doing so-and-so, you don't want to interact with them. Okay. Mark, if you can't write that, Mark, if you can't,
how complicated you're making this.
Mark, I have to go. Dinner's waiting. If you write it down, it can be built. If you don't want to write it down, it can't be built. You keep just abstracting and abstracting. We've been doing it for a year, right? I am so happy to devote serious coding time for what you want, but there has to be things. If you want a silver sphere to represent a paper from ACM Hypertext, write it down in a way that is implementable by Fabienne, and we will do it. It just cannot remain but why should it be visual? There's got to be ways of it being there, so to speak, right?
Yes, but I never said otherwise. I mean, I've always explicitly said that if you had, the spheres that I talked about are the knowledge objects. So they are, if you import 40 documents, 40 things, 40 files, then you might have 40 shapes. So yes. I'm not clear what needs more. Needs clarifying than that.
I'll tell you. It's very, very simple, and I think we all got to go. You need to write to Fabienne a design brief that says, on importing JSON or PDF, the initial appearance should be thus. I should be able to change it into this other appearance. I should be able to view them by these dimensions. This metadata is relevant for me to be able to do sorting. I should be able to open them up to read them in a traditional way, whatever it is. All of these things have to be listed. You've done software development yourself. You know what I'm talking about, right? But it has to be said. If you want it to be in a volume like this, or on a list, or on a table, all you need to do is write it down and say, this is what you'd like to see, and we will make it happen. Right? I so fundamentally agree with your perspective. I think we absolutely need to investigate this. There's got to be some more this there. It's got to be, to a degree, explained. And Mark, I think one of the things, with all due respect, in a sense, our dialogue may be hung up on, is we both so strongly feel that this needs to be instantly changeable. Right? And I think we may be opposite side of the coin on that often. But you got to have an initial thing to do another thing. And if that initial thing turns out not to be the initial thing in the near future, that's fine. But I got to go. It was very good today. I'm very grateful. And I look forward to seeing you all on Monday. And if there's anything on Slack or elsewhere, we will keep pushing and so on. Have a great week, and yeah, bye for now, everyone. Bye bye.